Hello, good evening, and welcome back. COVID, adults without A-levels to be offered free college courses. So adults in England without an A-level or equivalent qualification will be offered a fully funded college course the government has announced. And this is in a bid to try and help people out following on from the COVID lockdowns in order to say, well, hey, if you're not in a position to get a job at the moment, then hopefully after these government grants, you will be able to get a job, which is definitely beneficial for these individuals, and especially given the dire job market at the moment of people not wanting to hire because they're unsure of the people that they could take on given the state of play and unsure if their business will be able to continue. This will definitely help, not least because it will keep them in education a little bit longer in order to allow more time for the businesses to recover, which is definitely beneficial, no doubt about it. However, the problem, of course, comes to who pays for it. And as a conservative incentive, you would have thought that, well, hey, surely the individual pays for it. Maybe we might try a kind of readjusted student loan kind of thing. But no, that is not the case. Instead, just those who are earning, those businesses, corporations, earning over £3.5 million per year will be paying 0.5% in tax in order to fund it. That is how these things go. So if you're trying to do in-house training, well, apparently that is no longer good enough. Because you are successful, you now have to pay for the unsuccessful businesses in order to get by, which is not a very conservative thing at all. And I don't understand why they don't quite seem to get this in their heads, that a conservative government ideal is in order to get people to make their own decisions and be responsible for their own decisions, not find the larger, more successful businesses accountable for their decisions. And yes, if they are intent on government lobbying, then of course you can just say no to them. We're going to treat you the same as anybody else, and we will not be giving you special treatments in order to ensure that there is a fair marketplace and competition can take place. But that is not what is happening here, in which case they are trying to make up for it by taxing them at 0.5%. It really is as simple as that. Does that counteract a lot of lobbying that they do? No, of course it doesn't, otherwise they would not be doing the lobbying that they are doing. However, I think this is a bid in order to try and win back over the previous Labour voters. Of course, they won quite a few in the north, and therefore they're trying to keep them on side by offering more Labour policies in so-called free education, which isn't free education. It is education paid for by the taxpayers, and in this case, the more successful businesses. In which case, you might be thinking, well, hey, instead of doing just generic apprenticeships, why do they not instead offer on-the-job training to say, well, hey, you're doing an apprenticeship here, so instead of having to have a proper wage, you're going to be getting qualification at the end of it, or you're going to be taken on by this business if you wish to do true laissez-faire, to say, well, we are not going to dictate any minimum wage or anything like that. If we have to keep minimum wage, then we're going to find a workaround of a new law in order to say that you do not need to be paid in order to have this position. And at the end of it, you will be guaranteed a job with them, provided that you were to graduate, in which case you don't have to worry about earnings until after you graduate, at which point you will be earning the respectable salary that you have earned. Of course, in the intermittent year or two, then you will have to find a way to get by, in which case it would most likely be still living with your parents until you do land that proper job, which surely makes sense. Or if even as an apprentice you are still providing value, then you can still extract a wage from it, providing you are creating more value than you are taking. That will be the easy governmental way in order to not have to intervene at all, instead of having to tax these higher businesses. But for whatever reason, they're trying to encourage these small businesses, whereas, of course, if you just step back and do not lobby in favour of the larger businesses, you would not have to work in favour of the smaller businesses, because if they have something worthwhile, then you wouldn't have to support them as a governmental entity. You would instead just leave them to their own devices, and they would find their own clientele and would become a new big business instead of slinking away into nothing, which is what, of course, the vast majority of businesses tend to do. They tend to go bankrupt and slink away within a few years, 10 at most. The vast majority tend to disappear because they just cannot keep up with the ever-changing business marketplace, which is fair enough. What does it result in for the consumer? Well, of course, the best possible products at the best possible price. What does it result for in terms of the entrepreneur? Bankruptcy, and they have to start again with nothing. What does it result for in terms of the employer? Joblessness until they find a job at which they can transfer their skill over, and therefore they have the same job without having lost any of the savings that the entrepreneur has done. And of course, all the time helping the consumer reach a far better price for a equivalent product, if not a better product, which is the essence of capitalism, of course. So, the Office for Budget Responsibility has said the unemployment rate could peak at between 9.7% to 13.2% in the next few years. The most recent rate for May to July is only 4.1%. In his speech, Bojo will say, as the Chancellor has said, we cannot, alas, save every job. What we can do is give people the skills to find and create new and better jobs. And yes, of course, they cannot save every job. They do not have to create new jobs. That is down to the individuals. As a Conservative government, we would jolly well hope they would understand this, and they do not need intervention in order to save us, because we were doing just fine before the government decided to get involved. But he goes on to say, we're transforming the foundations of the skills system so that everyone has the chance to train and retrain. The idea is to kind of space it out over their life in order to have CPD continued professional development from whatever level they are at to whatever level they wish to get to, and have these qualifications in order to earn a better income, even though the vast majority of this could be done in-house. So, the offer of courses to adults without an A-level will be paid for through the National Skills Fund, topped up with £2.5 billion, the government said. It said the change will be backed by investment in college buildings and facilities, including over £1.5 billion in capital funding. Bear in mind there are only about 15 million actual taxpayers in the UK, given that half of the taxpayers are net takers instead of net contributors. Further details will be set out in an education white paper later in the year. In other plans, small businesses will be offered financial incentives to take on apprentices, and £8 million will be spent on skills boot camps in West Yorkshire, South West England, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire to cover sectors like construction and engineering, which follows pilots in Greater Manchester and the West Midlands that focus on digital skills. As we see here, the black women in tech coding the future, because, hey, you can't have an advancement unless you're being racist. That is really the only way to do things. So, and the government's online skills toolkit, currently providing training in digital and numerous skills, will be expanded to include 62 additional courses. But are they necessary? Responding to the government's measures, Labour's Education Secretary Kate Green said a week ago Labour called for a national retraining strategy fit for the crisis Britain faces. What the government proposes is simply a mix of reheated old policies and funding that won't be available until April. Be grateful for what you're getting as Labour policy, seeing as this is a Conservative government. By then, many workers could have been out of work for nearly a year, and the Tories still think that they will need to take out loans to get the training they will need to get back to work. Yes, whereas it'd be far better for them to say, hey, no lockdown, if you wish to take the risk, go ahead, and if you don't, then don't. She added the plans would not give workers the skills and support they need in the months ahead. Well, it's impossible to say that you should be ready for such a authoritarian lockdown. You definitely shouldn't. Should you vote for a government with the intention of getting a lockdown? No, you shouldn't. In that case, should you vote for Conservatives? Yes, you should. Have they let you down? Yes, entirely. Should the Conservatives then be held accountable for their own actions? Yes. Is greater spending and tax the answer? Always, always no. But that's the position that they found themselves in which case your best bet is to lift the lockdown and say, well, hey, get on with it as you will, and if you wish to hire people without paying them, then go ahead, instead of us having to give loans in order to provide to separate entities. That is the simple solution. But as always, let me know what you guys think down below. Always intrigued to hear what you guys have to say. And as always, until next time, have a good one.